I did just want to start by saying very quickly that this is the second part to another video I did on the same topic, which will be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. You don't need to watch it to understand this one, but this will be expanding on those ideas. So, by this point I'm going to guess that you understand the darker currents which run beneath the seemingly tranquil surface of Minecraft. There are hints at things vastly greater than yourself, forgotten empires and lost civilizations. Viewing the game through the lens of Lovecraft opens up a new world of possibilities for interpretation and analysis of this otherwise indecipherable world. Since last time I uncovered the secrets of the ocean monument in Ancient City, let's take things back to the surface with a much more commonplace and unassuming structure. The Desert Temple, or Desert Pyramid, is a sandstone structure found in, well, the desert. Its style and construction is somewhat reminiscent of Egyptian pyramids, although the scale of it is peculiarly much smaller than that of many real-life pyramids. Certainly there were small pyramids, but when someone thinks of pyramids, they generally imagine the colossuses of Giza, not something so unassuming as Minecraft's pyramid. Curiously, this pyramid is also trapped, leaving any unwary explorer to meet an explosive demise if they're not careful. Avoiding the trap, however, will yield you expensive loot, including various horse armors, in spite of the fact that horses do not spawn in desert biomes. Oddly enough, there are no player-wearable armors able to be found in these pyramid chests, though there may be smithing templates for armor trims amongst the other goodies. We'll come back to that. In the real world, Egyptian pyramids were generally constructed as massive tombs, and were often filled with riches in addition to the dead bodies of pharaohs. Judging by the presence of rotten flesh and bones in the pyramid chests, in addition to various valuable items, one can reasonably assume that the chests are meant to represent much the same traditions. And yes, I'm proposing that the rotten flesh and stuff that you always ignore in the pyramids is all that's left of whoever was buried there. Gross. Taking things back to Lovecraft, we can find a very similar structure to the Desert Pyramid in the form of an age-old lost city featured in The Nameless City. This lost city is thought to be older than mankind and is built strangely, with the proportions being too small for human habitation. In the heart of this city, the narrator finds a temple, which he descends into, and in the depths of this temple he discovers ancient bodies of inhuman beasts, reptilian creatures covered in golden ornaments and hidden in sarcophagi that line the walls. At the end of one particularly dark hall, he discovers an odd portal to somewhere else, and is nearly pulled into it by what seems to be the souls of the reptilian creatures who surely built this place, who come screaming down the corridor. Of course, Minecraft's Desert Pyramid doesn't exactly contain ancient lizardmen, but remember the point I made about the armor? It seems odd that the pyramid, which is proportionally rather small for what it is, would have its burial chamber filled with armor only able to be worn by animals. Other structures, such as the End City and the Ancient City, all have human armor amongst their loot tables, so why not this one? Much like in Lovecraft's work, there are also murals on the walls in the form of terracotta blocks and chiseled sandstone, and there are multiple burials all in the same place, burials that include this inhuman armor. Going further, we know for a fact that the ancient world of Minecraft was occupied by strange reptiles, which was confirmed by the existence of the six-legged sniffer, which we in turn know lived alongside intelligent beings, due to the fact that underwater ruins are the only place where we can find sniffer eggs. And as for Lovecraft's portal, I can only think of one thing in Minecraft that one might be able to describe as a portal leading to a soul-filled afterlife. With that, it is in fact time to talk about the Nether, more specifically the presence of soul magic and basically everything to do with soul sand. Soul sand is a type of Nether-exclusive sediment that is covered in anguished faces, much like the hideous reptilian visages seen in the Nameless City, and it pulls the player down when walked upon, much like how the reptilian horrors tried to pull the narrator into the portal. Furthermore, the place beyond the portal is described as being a land of mist, and the Nether is filled with an incredibly dense fog that makes seeing things in the distance difficult. By interpreting the Nether and the Desert Temple in this way, we can get a picture of something undeniably similar to the Lost Temple in the Nameless City. I wouldn't say that they are intentionally the same, but within this framework, the comparisons make sense. In discussing the Nether and Lovecraft, I would also be remiss not to mention the Wither, a player-constructed being of pure destruction that is, oddly enough, hinted at through a depiction in chiseled red sandstone. While no natural structures generate with chiseled red sandstone, one can reasonably assume that the material is something that would have been used in the ancient world, much like how regular chiseled sandstone and chiseled deep slate do appear in ancient structures. The Wither, being an unnatural amalgamation of souls brought to life by your hubris, is undeniably Lovecraftian in its implications, especially when it is understood both through the chiseled red sandstone and through one of the in-game paintings, which both would imply that the Wither has been made before. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it has a direct analog within Lovecraft's works, save for maybe some very tenuous ties to the concept of reanimation of the dead going horribly wrong, which is found in a number of his stories, but the themes are there regardless. When the Wither is summoned in the Windows edition of the game, the player will also get the Beginning achievement, which further implies that this is all something that has happened before, and recreating the Wither is only the beginning of something much greater. This something, I believe, is the path of darkness walked by the ancients, the one that may very well have been what spelled their destruction. And if this is the beginning, then one must wonder about the end. The End is, in my opinion, Minecraft's strangest dimension, a desolate grouping of islands hovering over a vast abyss ruled by a powerful dragon that can be constantly brought back from the dead, and that is connected to crystals that share some definite visual similarities with the Nether star dropped by the Wither. I think that the End is in fact the same end that the Wither fight implies to exist, as this is the darkest point you reach, your truest brush with the unknowable. Unlike with the other structures in the game, or even with your meddling with the Wither, the End is a world that must be unlocked by deliberately and intentionally following in the footsteps of the ancients. You must find a stronghold and ignite the portal, awakening a doorway that was surely shut eons ago. And there, on the other side, waiting for you, immortal, is the dragon. Even if you kill it, it can always be brought back again and again, as though there is some immutable essence that sword alone cannot destroy. But before we can fully unpack the Ender Dragon and what it means, let's talk about my favorite of Lovecraft's gods, the one and only Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep first appears in the story of the same name, where the unknowable and unfathomable god of outer space appears as a man, a sort of pharaoh who comes out of Egypt and amazes and terrifies the world with his incredible, unimaginable feats of science or magic. All who meet him are left changed, and people gather to see him as though they are under some strange spell. He claims to receive visions from other worlds, which allow him to reveal these things to mankind. Within Lovecraft's works, the gods are capable of taking on avatars which only channel a portion of themselves. This is what this version of Nyarlathotep is within the short story, merely a piece of a much greater whole, a puppet of a higher power. The power that Nyarlathotep holds over people reminds me of how the Ender Dragon is implied to have control over the Enderman, as evidenced by the Free the End achievement. The power of the End crystals could easily be seen as some bizarre science or magic, and the connection between Nyarlathotep and the pharaohs does link him to the Wither and the Desert Temple. Perhaps the creation of the Wither was one of his feats that amazed and horrified people, or at least an analog to it. The Beginning achievement, as mentioned before, further implies connection. Now, I don't mean to argue that the Ender Dragon is this specific avatar of Nyarlathotep, but rather that there is a definite reason to believe that it very well could be an avatar. Another avatar of Nyarlathotep mentioned in Lovecraft's works comes in the form of a hairless man with pitch-black skin, featured in Dreams in the Witch House, who is worshipped by ancient witch cults. This version is quite obviously very reminiscent of Minecraft's Endermen, who in turn either worship or are under the spell of the Ender Dragon, which has thematic ties to the Nyarlathotep short story. The final connection between the End and Nyarlathotep comes, oddly enough, in the form of the End crystals. These bizarre objects heal the Ender Dragon during combat, and are used to summon it again after it's died. Their shape, however, is most peculiar, as they are twisting crystals with many sides and are inscribed with strange symbols. A similar sort of crystal appears in Lovecraft's work, The Haunter of the Dark. in the form of the so-called Shining Trapezohedron, which is an odd artifact contained within a box inscribed with unknowable symbols and markings that is capable of summoning the titular Haunter of the Dark from another world. When peered into, the Shining Trapezohedron reveals great and terrible things to the narrator. He saw processions of robed, hooded figures whose outlines were not human, and looked on endless leagues of deserts lined with carved, sky-reaching monoliths. He saw towers and walls in nighted depths under the sea, and vortices of space where wisps of black mist floated between thin shimmerings of cold purple haze, and beyond all else he glimpsed an infinite gulf of darkness, where solid and semi-solid forms were known only by their windy stirrings, and cloudy patterns of force seemed to superimpose order on chaos, and hold forth a key to all the paradoxes and arcana of the worlds we know. Sound familiar? The Haunter itself is in turn described in the narrator's scattered notes. The long, winging flight through the void cannot cross the universe of light recreated by the thoughts caught in the shining trapezohedron, send it through the horrible abysses of radiance. I see the tower in the dark. I see it coming here, hell wind, titan blur, black wings. The Haunter of the Dark is another avatar of Nyarlathotep, and the trapezohedron itself has connections within the story to ancient Egypt and Antarctica, which in turn hints at the ancient city from last video. I think you can see the connections here. Combining aspects of these different avatars, it is easy to see the connections between the Ender Dragon and Nyarlathotep. Everything throughout the game has built to this encounter. This is the end, after all, where you face the avatar of the god your adventure has been circling. But what does it all mean? And what's the deal with the end poem? That, my friends, begins with Nodens. Nodens is among the strangest of the gods within Lovecraft's works, which is really saying something, and it's not for his unknowable nature, but rather how familiar he is. Nodens has more in common with Odin than Azathoth, appearing as an old man in strange robes in the dream quest of unknown Kadath. Nodens is accompanied by his night gaunts, a kind of bizarre flying creature that he is the master of. He opposes Nyarlathotep in the story, and is seen as a force beneficial to mankind, although there is a common belief that Nyarlathotep is the true master of the Night Gaunts. Nyarlathotep opposes the protagonist throughout the story in subtle ways, before a final confrontation where the god tells the protagonist that the rest of the gods are gone, and that he must seek them out in another place, which relates to the titular quest of the story, but we'll come back to that. However, the protagonist realizes he has been tricked, and the only way to escape Nyarlathotep is to wake from the dream. Put simply, and bear with me, I propose that Minecraft's wandering trader is Nodens. Much like the god Nodens, the trader appears very rarely and is robed strangely. He is also capable of becoming invisible through potions and disappears at random. He is additionally a master of beasts, as evidenced by his wandering trader llamas, a type of creature only found in association with him, much like how the Night Gaunts only serve Nodens. However, the Wandering Trader is also a wanderer from afar, someone who brings strange wares from distant lands, and who may amaze the player with these items they have never before encountered. His somewhat unassuming appearance is also of note, although he does cover his face in a way that would be consistent with someone who spends a great deal of time in deserts. These aspects make the Wandering Trader rather similar to the Pharaoh avatar of Nyarlathotep. Now, remember what I said about the Night Gaunts allegedly serving Nyarlathotep instead of Nodens? Well, I want to present the idea that Nyarlathotep and Nodens are one and the same, or at least that Nodens is an avatar of Nyarlathotep. In this context, them being the same makes sense, but it also makes sense within Lovecraft's own works, as anything that opposes a being as unimaginably powerful as Nyarlathotep would certainly be crushed rather quickly. Nodens surely exists as a false hope, much as the Dreamer in the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. Waking up to escape Nyarlathotep is surely another deception, as Nyarlathotep is not so easily defeated. Just as the Ender Dragon can be endlessly summoned again and again, Nyarlathotep permits false defeats as a way of toying with mankind, giving humans a sense of achievement that ultimately means nothing in the face of the cold universe. As for the end poem, which is shown after defeating the Ender Dragon and leaving the End, it is essentially a conversation between two unknown beings, who discuss the player as being a dreamer who is dreaming this world of Minecraft. I believe that it isn't too much of a stretch to interpret these beings as the avatars of Nyarlathotep, the Ender Dragon and the Wandering Trader. Both have watched your progress, guiding you in subtle ways toward this moment. Both are part of a dream, a game they built for you. To fully integrate all this, we must go back to the dream quest of Unknown Kadath and the titular quest that guides the story. In the tale, the protagonist dreams of the city where the gods live and intends to go there, into a realm called the Dreamlands. He is warned, but enters regardless, crossing vast distances and meeting many odd beings along the way, until at last he finds the city and is met by Nyarlathotep, who tells him to look elsewhere, as I've already described. The story ends with the dreamer waking up and seeing that the city from their dream is already where they were, with a new sunset rising in the distance. My argument here is that Minecraft is the Dreamlands, or at least a version of it. Much like Lovecraft's Dreamlands, the game guides you to your ultimate confrontation with an unknowable god that cannot be truly defeated by any means, a god who speaks in the end poem and explicitly refers to the player as dreaming. Minecraft is Nyarlathotep's world, and going deeper into the dream, searching for the lost gods of the ancient city or ocean monument, won't give you any real answers. They're all gone, and now that you've started this quest, there is no finishing it. Even waking up will bring you into another layer of the dream, just as the end poem implies. Nyarlathotep always wins in the end. So that's my Lovecraft interpretation of Minecraft. There are a couple of things I want to include as well, but couldn't fit into the rest of the script, such as the fact that the Endermen could also be interpreted as night gaunts, since they do have a much more similar appearance to the pitch black skin that the night gaunts are described as having. There was also an April Fool's update for Minecraft that allows players to go to the moon, which is made of moon cheese that looks identical to Endstone, and the moon features pretty prominently in the Dream Quest, but that's neither here nor there. Guardian beams are also visually similar to End Crystal beams, further implying connections between everything. The Sniffer and the Ender Dragon, in addition to being the only 6-limbed reptiles in the game, both have ears, a normally mammalian trait that may hint toward the Ender Dragon's design having links to the ancient past. And I do think that an argument, however weak, could be made in favor of the enchantment table book being the Necronomicon, as it allows you to unlock the secrets of arcane magic for your tools, and can be made stronger by being surrounded by bookcases, much like how the hideous revelations of the Necronomicon are supported by the sciences and existing literature. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you around next time. Let me know if there's anything you think I missed.